In broadcast, and we are live. We'll wait a few moments for people to trickle in.
Okay.
Hey
there they go.
There we go.
Those of you joining us, welcome to QSC TouchMix webinar. We're excited to have you.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks for signing up and logging on this morning.
It's going to be another rocking day in TouchMix land.
That's right. Got a really fun hour or so worked out for you guys this morning. Or
Hour or so, like hour or two.
Hour 3, 5, we'll see what happens.
I like how you add the so.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see what we can get through, We'll keep going.
Nice.
All right. Looks like we have a good number of people coming in. For those of you who are just joining us, welcome to the QSC TouchMix webinar. Jason is going to talk a lot about the basics of TouchMix today.
So much talking.
We have Golden and Chris with us. They're going to help him answer a lot of questions. They are pretty solid experts on the subject as well. I'm going to help just moderate. My name is Jacob. I am the training coordinator at QSC. So with that, there's just a couple ground rules. If you have questions, please ask them. Go ahead and throw them in the Q&A. We're not going to have the chat available, and you can raise your hand. There's a little option to do that, but the best option is to use the Q&A. But if you do have a microphone, go ahead and switch that on when you do have a question, and we will get you talking live, and you can just chat back and forth with our panelists and get your answers or your questions answered. With that, anything else before we get started?
Yeah. One little thing I wanted to mention, I think there was a bit of a mishap on the confirmation email mentioned that there were some tracks available to download. Those certain other webinar topics that we have are going to be using those tracks. This one in particular is not going to be utilizing them, so that ended up on that confirmation a little bit by mistake, and that was brought to my attention at the last minute. So I apologize for any confusion that may have caused. If you've got the files, that's cool. If you want to join, one of our later sessions, we will be utilizing those. And if you weren't able to get them, that's completely fine. You were just kind of getting through a high-level overview of the mixer today, and we're not going to be digging into a whole lot of audio playback. Just wanted to clear that up real quick. Otherwise, Golden and Chris, you want to just say a quick hello?
Hey there, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for joining.
So Golden is a front of house mixing and recording expert. We're very happy to have her on here, and she actually does a really cool Facebook Live broadcast a couple of times a week for us, talking about TouchMix and other different kinds of applications. So if you get a chance to catch one of those are very insightful and very, very cool as well. So she's awesome. And Chris is one of our resident application engineers. So we got a pretty good team on here this morning to try and help you out and answer your questions. And I'll do my best to convey some worthwhile knowledge to you this morning. All right. And with that, I think I'm just going to kick it off. So as I mentioned, this will be introduction to TouchMix. We're going to just get through, the high level here. So we're going to talk about the hardware. We'll talk through basic navigation and dive into the channel strip settings. We'll also take a look at a couple of unique features that simplify complex processes and allow you to get a great sound very quickly and easily, regardless of what your skill level might be. So should be a pretty fun lesson here. I'm going to dive right in. The first thing I do want to talk about is the hardware itself. I'm going to start from the outside in, and I'm going to go ahead and switch over to my PowerPoint view. Yeah, just got a couple of PowerPoint slides. The whole thing won't be a PowerPoint, don't worry. I think I got maybe 50 or 60 slides to get through. I'm just kidding. So there's a couple here. I can't actually show you, my camera's not set up to show you some of the physical components of the board. We're going to be focusing on my screen once we get into the lesson. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the physical connections. So there are 3 models in TouchMix. There's the TouchMix 30 Pro, the TouchMix 16, and the TouchMix 8. And the connections on the 3 are going to be 24 mic line inputs on the 30, 16, and then 8 on the TouchMix 8 and 16 respectively. There are additional stereo inputs on each model as well. So the TouchMix 30 Pro has 2 stereo inputs with an additional 1/8" input, a stereo 1/8" input, so 3 stereo inputs in total there. And the 16 and 8 each include 2 1/4" stereo inputs as well. So there's a variety of different inputs on those. And the mic line inputs are using Class A, very high quality preamps there. And then there are on each model, 4 of those connections are going to be combination connectors. So they will accept a XLR cable or a 1/4" cable. So there's a little bit of versatility there. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the outputs. Along with the inputs, there are a pretty good amount of output options here. On the TouchMix 30 Pro, we have 12 mono aux outputs. Boom, right there. And all of the outputs, the main outputs and the auxes included, all feature the same suite of processing. So we've got a 3rd band graphic EQ, as well as a 6-band parametric EQ, plus limiting, delay, and notch feedback filters. And we'll talk a little bit more about those later in the lesson. In addition, we also have 2 stereo auxes. So there's 2 1/4" outputs as well. So you've got your 14 mono XLR outputs and then your 1/4" outputs like that. That's the TouchMix 30 Pro. And then on the 8 and 16, we have 6 mono outputs on the 16 with 2 stereo outputs. So that's 6 mono XLRs with 2 1/4" outputs. They do feature the exact same output processing. So all 3 models have the same processing on all of our outputs and inputs. And then on the TouchMix 8, we have 4 mono outputs with a single stereo 1/4" connection, which is paralleled to 3 and 4. So you can link auxes 3 and 4 on the 8 and create a stereo pair out of those, and then you can use that 1/4" output for that as well. Okay, so there you go. So there's my brief PowerPoint introduction, talking about the physical inputs and outputs of the mixer. I'm going to go ahead and switch my camera view now. Now you're able to see my actual mixer. There's my hand. All right, so let's talk about the controls themselves. The main control surface is a touchscreen. On the TouchMix 30 Pro, this is a 10-inch multi-touch capacitive screen. This will accept up to 4 touch points simultaneously. And so you can grab multiple faders or multiple controls at a time. On the TouchMix 8 and 16, this is a little bit smaller screen, so it's a 7-inch screen, and it is a single touch capacitive screen. So it does not accept the multi-touch. That's just a simple difference in hardware. But you do have the ability to pair an iPad or a tablet with any of the mixers. And so if you're using an iPad or a tablet, those screens do have multi-touch capabilities, and so you can take advantage of that functionality that way on the 8 or 16. And then we have the other primary control here is the large encoder wheel, which you can't really see in my screen. Actually, I might just, there you go. So here's my encoder wheel. You've got your screen and your encoder wheel. These are the primary 2 controls that you're going to need here. And just to demonstrate, I can select any of my faders on my screen with my left hand, and then I use my wheel here to adjust the level. It's very simple. So it's a 2-handed technique. We call it touch and turn, and that's sort of the recommended workflow for TouchMix here. Of course, you can, mix on the glass itself. You can slide this up and down with your finger, but the wheel provides a really nice tactile control that you can take advantage of, and it also gets you kind of that 2-handed technique, so you can really kind of start to fly around the board and mix really effectively and really efficiently with this method. Additionally, if you press the wheel down while you're adjusting it, you get fine control. So while it's normal, you're getting single dB increments as you increase and decrease the wheel. If you press it down, you're going to get half dB increments. So you can get much finer control with these tools than you could on an actual physical fader. You're still relying on your finger touching that fader up and down and nudging it up and down. With this wheel, you can get a really, really fine level of control. So that's a really nice thing to take advantage of. Okay, so that's our main kind of mixing technique there. Talking about navigation here, what you're looking at, this is my main mix view here that I have. You're going to be presented with 8 input faders on the screen at any given time within the main mix view, and then your main output fader. And this output fader is going to live there at all times. That never goes away. And it's It does pertain to which mix you are mixing. So right now we're in my main mix, so it's showing me my output fader for my main output. On the left hand of the screen here, I have all of my mix navigation buttons. So I can see my main mix, which is highlighted right now. This is what I'm looking at. And then underneath, all of these different buttons will allow me to access my various aux mixes. So on my TouchMix 30 Pro here, I do have 14 outputs, and I can enter into any one of those mixes, and I can create separate mixes for each of my different outputs. And then on the 8 and 16, you have the same options. You've got the 6 outputs on your 16 or your 4 outputs on your 8, and these buttons will be there for all of those mixes respectively. So it's very quick and very easily to punch into any of your mixes that you might need to get to at any given time. And these controls never move either. No matter where you are on the mixer, you will always have these navigation buttons here so you can get into any of your mixes. Getting it back into my main mix here. The top of the screen is our navigation strip. This is on my main mix. It's showing us our different fader banks. So we have 8 faders at a time on the TouchMix 30 here. We do have 24 inputs plus our stereo inputs. And so there's going to be arranged in banks of 8 channels each. And I can navigate between them with these buttons up here. So this is my 1 through 8. Now I've got my 9 through 16, and then 17 through 24. And then I move into my stereo channels here. And then after that, I can access my effects master channels. So there are effects on the mixer. I can also access all of my aux master outputs within a couple of fader banks here themselves. So I just want to go in and make adjustments to all of my, or any of my aux mixes there. I can do that. And then you've got your different group types. We're not going to get too far into the groups. There actually is an entirely separate webinar where we dive into the groups very specifically. But on all 3 models, you do have channel group options available to you. On the 30, we have subgroups as well as DCA groups. And on the 8 and 16, you're going to have the option for DCAs and mute groups as well. The 8 and 16 don't have the subgroups option. So there you go. So it's very simple navigation. On each channel, other than the main channel fader, there also is a mute control, so I can mute any of my channels really easily. There is a pan control right above the fader, so if I select that and I can use my dial, I'm going to punch back in at this point so you can get a better look at my screen. I'm going to use my dial. I can pan my channels back and forth like that. Very simple. And then above that, there is a Q button control, which allows you to monitor any of the channels on your board. Every single input and output has this Q option. What that's going to do, it's going to direct that audio to this very specific Q output, and you can connect headphones to that, or some desktop monitors, small format monitors, something like that, and then you can listen to audio anywhere on the mixer that you need to listen to at any given time as the mix engineer. Okay, the other really important navigation tool that we want to be aware of is the home button, which I just covered with my face here. But there is a home button right here on the mixer. If you do have your mixer in front of you and you're looking at it, that should be very obvious. It's your home button, and this button is always going to get you to your main mix. So if you need to get to your faders and be mixing on your faders, your home button does that. Okay, that is the basics of navigation. It's laid out very linearly, very clearly. It's really easy to get around. Now let's go ahead and dive into one of our channels and take a look at the actual channel strip processing within an input. I'm going to do that. I'm going to access any of my channels simply by pressing the name of the channel above the fader, just like that. And now get right into my channel strip here. And now I have all of my channel strip options laid out on my navigation strip at the top of the screen. It's very easy here. We've got everything you would expect. You've got EQ, compression, gate. We've got effects routing right from the channel here. I can route out to my auxes as well. We've got some presets, which we'll get into, and I've got a general setup screen for my channel here. We're going to start with this screen though. This is actually our overview screen. So this is like a one-stop shop, I like to call it. It's showing you sort of your more show critical controls on a single page. It's essentially allows you to see the complete configuration of the channel from one screen. And all of these controls are active as well. So I have my EQ curve here. I can see any EQ that's on there. I have my compressor and my gain reduction meters, and my controls here. So these are active fields. If I touch like my threshold field, for instance, and I use my wheel, I can make adjustments to these parameters right from this screen. I can route out to any of my effects sends here, or I can make adjustments to any of the aux routing for this channel right from this one screen, and I can make adjustments to my EQ if I want to do that. So this is a very, very useful screen if you just want to kind of punch into a channel and very quickly see how it's configured and make some adjustments on a single page. This little bar up at the top here, real quick, I'll talk about. On the left-hand side of it here is the preset field. That is simply going to tell you what preset might be recalled in the channel at any given time. It's information that might be useful to know, and so we've included that here. The little plus symbol button here will actually also navigate you directly into your presets tab here. But we're going to come back into this in a minute. But you do have the option of navigating that way. And now we have our digital gain and our delay. So I'm going to pause here for a second and talk about the digital gain and the delay a little bit. So the preamps I mentioned are analog. I actually don't know if I mentioned that, but I'll mention it now. The preamps on the mixer are analog. And that means that they're not scene recallable. So you have your trim knobs up at the top, but you can't see in my screen. I'll see if I can, whoop, too far. There we go. Oh, just out of view. Anyway, if you're looking at the mixer, you should be able to see those trim knobs very clearly. If you don't have a mixer in front of you, trust that they're there. But so you have trim gain control knobs for all of your analog preamps there, and that's to get the initial level of your preamp dialed in. But those are not digital, and they're not automated, so you cannot save that information within a scene. Additionally, if you're mixing from an iPad and you're not physically next to the board, you can't physically access those knobs. You might be at a disadvantage without being able to control those preamps. The digital gain allows you to do that. You can sort of leverage the two together in those scenarios. So if you need scene recallable gain settings, or if you're primarily mixing remotely from a tablet device and you want to be able to have some control over your initial gain of your channels, your digital gain is how you're going to accomplish that. What it is an additional plus or minus 15 dB of gain after the preamp stage. So ideally what you do to leverage these two controls together is you just simply set all of your analog trims to a nominal level, say like noon or maybe 1 o'clock. So they're all set the same, whatever that setting, whatever you choose that to be. Set them all the same, as long as none of them are clipping. If you're clipping any of your channels, you want to actually take that back a little bit more, but for the most part, you want to have them all set to the same level, so you don't necessarily have to worry about what those are. We know we're getting signal into the channel because those are up to a level, but we're not going to worry about using those to really fine-tune the gain level of the channel. From there, we're going to use the digital gain. If any channel at that noon position on my analog trim isn't strong enough, if I need more signal after that point, I can use my digital gain and I can increase that to get that channel up to where it needs to be. Inversely, if I set that trim to noon and it's too hot, I have too much signal coming in, I can take it down a little bit as long as there's no clipping. So the digital gain is not going to take you out of clip because it is a stage that is after the analog stage. So that is something to be aware of. But if you feel like you want to take the level down a little bit, you do have that option to do so. Aside from just leveraging the channels, it can also be used in the instance, where maybe you've got a channel that is completely maxed out on the analog trim and you're still not getting enough signal into that preamp. It's a particularly weak signal coming into there. You can then come into the digital gain and you have up to 15 dB that you can add after that so that you can hopefully bring that up to an appropriate level. Cool. So that is the digital gain. And then we have our delay. We do have input and output delay on the mixer. So right here, we're looking at an input. So this is where we can access our input delay. We have up to 100 milliseconds of input delay. And what this does, very, very simply, it will delay the incoming audio signal by the amount of time specified on the dot here, up to 100 milliseconds. And the primary use for an input delay like this would be if you're running an event that is utilizing video. So if you have live video and live audio that needs to sync up, in real time, you're more than likely going to need to delay your audio because video processing comes with a lot higher latency than audio processing does. So what you might end up with is a scenario where you have somebody talking, maybe they're on screen and you've got them up on a big presenter screen so the audience can see them and they're huge, but you're going to actually hear your audio from their microphone before you see their lips move on the screen. So you're going to have an out of sync lip sync there. So you would just use a little bit of delay on the input to delay their microphone signal so that it lines up and matches your video, and everything looks and sounds great. So that's your input delay there. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and quickly just move through the rest of my channel strips settings here, starting with my EQ. So we do have all these controls here in my overview, but then if I just go and select each of them, I do have a full screen control for each of these parameters. We're looking at my EQ now. I can select any of my filters here, and I can adjust the gain, I can adjust the frequency or the bandwidth, also known as Q, simply by using my dial here. Now on the TouchMix 30, we do have the multi-touch screen, so you can do that. You can kind of mix with your fingers on the EQ curve, and that's pretty fun to do. But it's not always the most accurate way to dial in EQ. So you can do it, but it might be more advantageous to use the fine controls down here. All right. We also have our compressor. We can punch our compressor in and out here. We've got all the the controls that you would normally associate with your compressor, and we have a gate. So EQ, compression, and gate are pretty standard tools on any mixing channel strip. They're going to give you the control over your signal. You're going to have your control over your dynamic range of the signal, and if you need to control if you need to manage what is being allowed to come through that channel, you can use a gate to do that. A gate is very the name of it is very applicable. What you're doing is you're almost actually putting, if you imagine a physical gate that it's opening and closing, you set a limit for when you want that gate to open and allow signal to pass over your channel. So if your audio signal on that particular channel is below whatever threshold you've set on this gate, the gate will remain closed and it doesn't allow any audio to pass. And then as soon as the signal breaches that threshold level that you've set here, now the gate opens and it allows that audio from that signal on to pass forward. It's very, very common to use that on drum microphones and other various microphones on a stage. If you have a large musician band set up, you've got a whole different, all kinds of different microphones on the stage. A lot of times, the stage wash and the different instruments will kind of bleed in and out of the other microphones on stage, and you don't want things like that happening. It muddies the mix and it can cause feedback and things like that. So a gate is a very, very nice tool for cleaning that kind of thing up. And then we have our effects. So there are a number of effects on all of our mixers. I'm not going to get too much into the effects in detail because we actually do have another webinar where we're going to punch through all of the effects very specifically and kind of run through some of the background with the effects and a healthy workflow for working with effects and things like that. But for this high-level training, there are effects included on the board. They are very high-quality effects. They are modeled after some very well-known and beloved physical rack effects hardware. We've got a couple of delays here. We've got a mono stereo delay. We've got 2 reverbs, a dense and a lush reverb. We have a pitch shifter, and we have a chorus effect. And on the TouchMix 30 here, you can see I have 6 effects on my page here. There are 6 effects engines on the TouchMix 30. There are 4 effects engines on the 8 and 16, so there is a slight difference there. They still do have the same total number of effects. It's just the number of instances you can recall of your effects are a little bit different. There are 2 less instances that you can utilize at any given time on the 8 and 16. Nonetheless, that is a good number of effects to be able to have at your disposal for any event you might be running. I can route my channel out to any of my auxes this way, and then I have my presets. So the presets are going to be one of the things on this board that I'm going to get a little bit excited about. I get excited about the whole thing, but the presets are extremely valuable, extremely useful. With everything I've shown you so far, the basic navigation of the board, how to get into your channel, and then where all of these tools are. If you're, an experienced or professional sound engineer, seeing how to get around the board as much as I've shown you so far, I could probably turn you loose. I could probably get you up and running. You know where things are, and you can get yourself dialed in accordingly. If you are more of a novice, if you have less experience with some of these things, or maybe no experience with mixing, maybe this is the first time you've ever seen a mixing console, the presets are going to be your best friend. Even if you are, that professional or more experienced engineer, the presets can also be very advantageous to you because they can save you a whole lot of time. So just a quick overview of the preset creation process. The presets were created in live environments with real musicians using active monitors and PA systems. So what they do is they'll give you mix-ready channel settings with just the touch of a couple buttons here. Now they may not be completely perfect every time, but it will always get you at least 80% of the way to a complete channel setting. So that is a huge head start. And if you, like I said, if you're a novice, this might be, a better sound that you could have gotten on your own. Nonetheless, it's going to be completely usable. It is going to get you a good sounding mix very quickly. And to demonstrate here, I'll just recall a couple of presets. They are arranged here by instrument type or vocal type. So if I scroll through my first menu here, there's a 3-menu system. I've got, bass, drums, frets, keyboards, percussion, strings, vocals and speech, brass, band, harmonica. So let's just say I wanted to dial up, a vocal preset. I can do so like this. I can select vocals and speech, and then in my next column here, I have a couple of different type options. So I can say it's a general, any vocalist, it's just a vocal channel. I just want a starting point. I can choose that. Or if I know, I want something that is more tailored to a musical application, I can select music. And I got a couple options here. And then I have some speech options, which are designed by different microphone types. So just backing out, if I look at my music types, I've got a vocals female with a compressor and a vocals male with a compressor. So that comp at the end of the preset name there indicates that it will give you a compressor setting. So all of these presets are going to give you an EQ curve. They're going to give you a nice tailored EQ curve based on that application and that instrument. Additionally, it may or may not give you some compressor settings and or gate settings as well. The factory presets here won't ever include effects because effects are rather subjective, and there's a lot of other elements and parameters that need to be kind of taken into consideration when you're applying those. So our factory presets, they're going to give you a great EQ curve and maybe some compression and some gate. If you, at any time, you want to know a little bit more about any of these presets, you can hit this button right here that says preset info. So if I select a preset, let's say I select my preset here that says speech lavalier. So I've made my selection all the way to into the third column here. So this is going to be my actual preset that I'm going to recall. And it's going to be a speech application preset. And I'm telling it that I've got my presenter he's wearing a lavalier like I've got on here. If that's not enough detail for me in the name, I can hit preset info there. And it just gives me a sentence or two about what that preset is going to do. So right here, this is lavalier style microphones for speech. To recall this, all we're going to do is with it selected there, hit the green recall button. And then we're going to check this bar here. So this field in here where it says current preset, that's going to indicate what preset is actually recalled on my channel here at any given time. So I've got speech lavalier in that field there. Now I know my preset has been recalled, and I can go ahead and go look at what it did. Look at that. So it gave me an EQ curve. Now this might look like a pretty extreme EQ curve, which is one of the reasons I like to show this one off. But if you were to listen to this preset, you actually are listening to this preset. My lav here, I'm running through another TouchMix 16 right now, and I've got this preset running on this microphone. So you are listening to this in real time. But it is a very, very usable preset. It's a great starting point, if nothing else. It also gave me some compressor settings here, so that's pretty handy. So right off the bat, it configures your channel strip for you and gives you a usable sound. From there, I would just start dialing up the channel, and I'd be off and running. Just to highlight a couple of other these little options here, anytime you do recall a preset, it's going to pull your channel fader for that channel all the way down. It's going to change the name of the channel, and it may or may not apply some phantom power, depending on what the preset is. If you don't want any of those parameters changed while you're recalling your preset, you can switch these on, and you've got omit levels and assignments, omit name, and omit phantom. And so that will remove those parameters from being affected by your preset recall there. In addition, if you ever wanted to save a custom preset, you can do so here by switching the toggle from factory to user, and then you have the ability to save any of your own custom presets. So if you maybe start with one of our presets and then you fine tune it, like I said, it's going to get you at least 80% of the way there. Maybe you feel like you want to tailor it a little bit more, customize it a little bit. You go back and you make some fine adjustments, and you really like what that sounds like. You can come in and you can save that as your own custom preset. So that is very useful as well. And let's say we're going to do that. Let's say we're going to come out here and we want to make some small adjustments to this channel. So I come back out to my EQ, or maybe I come out to my compressor, and I can do that at this time. But let's say, you know, I'm still not confident with this level of control. I don't have the experience working with an EQ. I don't have the experience working with a compressor, and I kind of look at all these parameters, and maybe I don't understand what they all do or what they all mean. It can be daunting. It can be intimidating. Or if you are good with an EQ, you do understand this process, but you just kind of want to limit the number of controls that you're looking at just to save yourself some time and make some broad changes to your mix here. We have something called simple mode, and simple mode is awesome. This button right here where it says simple, I'm going to show you this to you. So this is the advanced mode. You've got all your parameters here on your EQ. If I change this to simple, there you go. Now I have 4 knobs. So if you've ever operated the EQ in your car stereo, this is basically what you get. It's very simple, and it's a lot less to take in. It's a lot less to involve yourself with. Essentially it's going to reduce the number of controls that it is presented to the user, to kind of make that a little bit less daunting. But it still does have all of that fine processing happening in the background. That doesn't go away. We're just kind of removing some of those finer controls from being presented to the user. Now I'm going to show this off on the compressor as well. So here's my compressor screen. I changed this to simple, and I have 1 knob. That is pretty easy. I can select my knob there, and I can compress this more, or I can compress this less. And meanwhile, all of these other things are still set to where they're set here. But with my simple mode engaged, I don't have to worry about those. I know I just need to get more compression on this channel, or I need to ease off the compressor on this channel, and I can do that. So that's saving time and or just acting sort of as a gateway into learning and being able to comfortably use some of these tools. So it's a really fantastic feature that we've put on here. And you do have the option, if you want to, you can switch this on and off, per tool or per parameter. All of these options have a simple mode. Or you can go into your menu here. So I pressed my menu button there. And in the menu, in your screen mode options down here, you have simple and advanced. So if I know I just want to set the entire mixer up in simple mode and not worry about the advanced controls at this time, I can just press simple, and I can confirm that. And now the entire mixer is laid out in simple mode. So everything, no matter where I go, I'm going to be looking at simple mode. All right. So there we go. So that's our input channel strip configurations. Pretty easy to navigate, pretty easy to get up and running quickly and easily, and get a really nice, really usable sound, with a couple of these tools that I've shown you. We're going to hop into the output processing now. Right before I do that, just quickly, I want to show you the setup screen. However, so every input does have this setup screen here, and the couple of things we can do here is name the channel. So if I want to give my channel a custom name, if I don't like lavalier, maybe I want to be more specific. Maybe this lavalier is on a specific presenter or a specific person. I can maybe add their name in there. So I can name my channel. I can link channels here. So if I hit this link button and then confirm the link, now that's illuminated in blue. We've got this chain link icon here. We also have this little chain link icon here on the channel. And if I press home, now I've got those 2 chain links there, and those 2 channels are now linked. So the faders move together in unison. Any changes I make to any of the parameters in one of the channel will be mirrored in the other channel as well. So you can link 2 channels together that way. They do link in what we call obvious pairs. So 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, and so on in that order. You can't link like 2 and 3, for example. So it is an obvious pair linking of the channels, but you do have the ability to link your channels there. That's very advantageous. Getting back into the setup screen here, a couple of other things we can do on this screen is reverse the polarity of the channel. We can also engage our phantom power on the channel from this screen. And then here's our input, delay, and digital gain. So these are secondary controls for that function. So it is located on the overview screen up at the top, as well as on this setup screen. So I can punch in my delay here, and I can adjust my digital gain here. The nice thing about the delay control in the setup screen here is that you do get the delay time expressed in a couple of different ways instead of just the milliseconds in the overview screen. So here we have it expressed in feet, milliseconds, and meters. So I can maybe a little bit more accurately kind of tune in my delay using those different parameters there. or associating that way. We can also assign the channels to any of the channel groups that we have on the mixer. So on my TouchMix 30 here, I've got subgroups, DCAs, and mute groups, and I can assign any of my channels to these groups from within their own setup screens. Again, not going to talk too much about the groups. We'll have a separate webinar for that, and I really hope you come back because that's a really good one. I can also unassign the channel from going to the main output if I want to. If I don't want a specific channel to be going to the main mix at all, I can come into my setup screen and I can press this button and remove it there. You'll notice that on the channel itself as well, when I do that, the little left-right indicator there is de-illuminated. So now I know I'm going to my main output, and now I am no longer going to that output. So there you go, setup screen on your inputs. Now let's go ahead and pop into the outputs. This might be a good time to answer a question or two if there are any that are popping up yet. Do we have any questions out there? Or should I just
Not right now.
keep trucking along? Perfect. So I'm going to go and get into my output now. I'm just going to start with my main output, and I do that just the same way, like right from in here. This fader, is here. It always lives here. I can simply press main. That will enter me into my my main output processing. Otherwise, I can hit home, and if I'm in my mix view here like this, I still have my main fader here, and I can press main, and it gets me into my output processing for my main output there. Looks very similar to our inputs here. Little brain fart. We have a lot of the same, the navigation, first of all, looks the same. We still have our overview screen, kind of showing us our overview of how the output is configured. We have our parametric and our graphic EQ here. So on the outputs, we do have, as I explained at the top of the lesson, we've got our 6-band parametric EQ as well as our 28-band graphic EQ. So you do have both EQs in your outputs, and you can use either or you can use them in series of each other. They will run into each other. There we go. And I've got limiting here. So a limiter, if I punch that on, a limiter is essentially a compressor with I'm in simple mode there. Here we go. A limiter is a compressor with a very, very high compression ratio dialed in, and it acts more as a signal limiter as opposed to just kind of more of a dynamic control. And this is used primarily on outputs to actually set a hard signal level limit for that output. If you don't want the level to go over a certain limit, you can use a limiter, hence the name, to limit that level. And this can be done if you just want to set up some protection for any of your amplifiers or loudspeakers that are connected to that output down the line and things like that, or if you just kind of want to have a hard stop for where that signal is going to get to, your limiter can do that. I do have the ability to route my channel out to any of my auxes here. Now, this is being able to route the main directly to the auxes is unique to the TouchMix 30. The 16 and 8 do not have this option. But there are other ways actually of sort of duplicating and mirroring your main mix in auxes there. We also have presets. These are really handy if you're using QSC loudspeakers with your TouchMix 30 Pro, which you should be. It's just sort of the family of the system there kind of really can come together nicely and give you a really easy setup. And the reason, the how of that is utilizing these presets here. So you can see any of our Live Sound Portable PA loudspeaker series available here. So if you're using the CP series, for example, or if you've got some E series, K.2, Legacy K, KLA, or KW, you can come in here and you can recall output presets to optimize the output for those particular loudspeakers and really just kind of make the system work together and work to the best of its ability. You also have the ability to save custom presets in here. So if you dial in a specific setup for an output that you want to be able to get back to, you can go ahead and save that as a custom preset and get back to it at any time. And then in my setup screen here, we have a few options. Probably the most advantageous here are these QSC amplifier and speaker settings options. So along with the presets, which is going to configure some EQ and limiting and things like that to kind of optimize the channel to those speakers. Additionally, we have these recommendations here. So these screens pop up, and I'll show you K.2. So if I know I'm using some K.2 speakers, let's say I've got some K12.2s. I can open up this screen. I can select K12.2. If I want to give it a preset. I can recall that here. But really, if you're kind of configuring this from the mixer, you just leave your speaker in the default mode, and then you put your processing on your output here. And it even tells you how to set the gain. So that is extremely helpful. Right here on my K12.2, it's telling me that I'm going to, there we go, recall the default preset on the speaker and then rotate the speaker gain 2 clicks past 0. So it tells me exactly how to set up that speaker to align it to work the most efficiently with the mixer. So, pairing the two together can get you a really nice, great sounding PA that is incredibly easy to set up. So those are pretty advantageous. Okay. Now I'm going to go back here to this button right there, which I very cleverly skipped over earlier. This is our anti-feedback system. So now I'm going to start talking about a couple of the features on here, aside from the presets in simple mode, that are tailored towards taking complex functions and complex processes and simplifying them and condensing them. So this is our anti-feedback system. This is an incredibly powerful tool that is available on all 3 of the mixers here. So essentially, if you're unfamiliar with feedback, which if you're a sound engineer, I'm sure you're not, but feedback is the nemesis of any live sound engineer. The anti-feedback wizard here allows you to automatically ring out your system for maximum gain before feedback, which is to stabilize your system so that you can get the desired level or the most level out of it without creating feedback. So it's used to create stability in your system. Not only that, but the feedback wizard also helps you control feedback throughout the entire event. So you can use it to initially ring out your room, and you can use it to kind of maintain that stability throughout your performance. And on the TouchMix 30 here, we're using 12 tunable notch filters to do this. And on the 8 and 16, you have 8 notch filters to do this. And this is available on every single output. I've got it on my main here, and I've got it on any of my auxes. So you can run this feature on every single output independently. And just to give you a little insight, notch filters are essentially parametric EQ filters with a very narrow bandwidth. So we use these to just eliminate offending frequencies that are causing feedback without adversely affecting the overall sound of the output. And the nice thing about this dedicated feedback system is we're using the filters in the system here, and we're not having to utilize anything in our graphic or parametric EQ. So this is a separate independent thing. And then after this is done, we still have a full graphic and parametric EQ that can be used to shape, the sound afterwards. So this is strictly and simply controlling the feedback, and it's using these filters to do so. When feedback happens, it is because a very specific or a very particular tiny band of frequencies is feeding back in the system. So if you eliminate that frequency or those band of frequencies, you stop the feedback. It's pretty simple. And that's what this does. So, and what it's doing is that it's sort of modeling what a professional sound engineer would do to sort of try to control feedback in an event. So traditionally, when you ring out a room, an engineer would set up an entire PA system. You set up the loudspeakers, you set up all the microphones, you set up the whole thing. And then ideally, you would begin to dial in some settings, even if it's just preliminary. Now, there are a couple of places throughout your workflow that you might run this process. It's sort of up to you, or can be set up to the type of event you're doing or any time restrictions you might have. But ideally, you'd kind of want to get some at least preliminary starting processing going on your channels, because if you just open up a whole bunch of open, uneq'd microphones, the PA is just going to take off almost immediately. So you're probably going to put a little bit of EQ on each of your microphones, maybe some compression if you already, have assignments for each of your microphones, and then you pull up your fader levels to about where you think you're going to have them during the show. And that might not be perfect yet, but you get them up to a nominal level where you think they're going to sit roughly, and then you're going to take your main output here. So what that would be here. I've got processing going on. I do have a microphone connected here, so I'm going to be careful for a second. You start dialing up your mix a little bit, and from that point, once you got your mix kind of dialed up a bit, then you start to take your main output fader and you start to dial it up, and you try to get it to the level that you think you want to have that throughout your performance. And very likely, on the way to getting it there, you're going to experience feedback at some point. The system's going to start feeding back. As that happens, you dial the fader back a little bit, and then you go into your EQ and start to, apply some of your filters on your graphic EQ and find that frequency that is feeding back and try to cut it out so that you tame that feedback. Or maybe you have an RTA. There's an RTA here, a real-time analyzer. Maybe you can see the frequency spike on the RTA as the feedback's happening, so then you can more accurately go in and kind of notch it out with your EQ that way. And so that's the manual process of doing it. And then you would repeat this as many times as you needed to, until you had your output where you wanted it without the system feeding back. And so you've stabilized the system. That is roughly what that process would be like for a professional engineer. The feedback tool does that for you. It runs the back half of that process automatically. And I'm actually going to show this to you. This is going to get a little gnarly here. We're going to create some feedback in my kitchen, and it's going to be fun. So what we're doing here, we're going to assume, that we've gone through, we've applied some processing, and this is really easy to do on Mixer to get those initial, on this mixer to get those initial kind of processes on your channels. You just use presets, right? So you go through all of your channels, you dial up some presets, that gives you your starting point processing. You dial up your fader levels, and then you dial up your main fader, and surprise, you have no feedback because the presets work so well, the system doesn't feedback. But in the instance that you do get feedback, maybe you're in a weird setup, maybe you've got some microphones that are in front of your main PA speakers or something like that. You're going to want to run this tool to stabilize that PA system. So from that point, you're going to come in here and you're going to activate the feedback wizard. So there is two modes here. There's the manual mode, and then there's the wizard, which is the automatic mode. And you're really only going to want to use the automatic mode before the event starts, at some point before the event. So it could be before sound check, it could be after sound check, it could be during sound check. It kind of depends on, again, your workflow and what the circumstances require. But you're going to come in here and you're going to run the wizard. You don't want to run the wizard during an active event, and here's why. So I've got my microphone. I'm going to go here, and I do have a microphone plugged into my channel 1 here. I'm going to go ahead and just reset all of this stuff. I'm going to, just for the sake of this demo, I'm going to not apply my initial processing. Here, I'm just going to leave this channel wide open. So this is my microphone channel. I've got my main output down there. I'm going to just pull this right up to Unity, and we can see, if I talk into it, I can see my levels there. So we know we've got signal into the channel. I'm going to go back into my anti-feedback here. And before I get into the wizard, I'm just going to go ahead and bring this level right up to the point where it's going to start to take off on me. So I'm going to take my microphone and I'm going to put it right in front of my desktop monitors here. I know that's probably creating a lot of cringing out there right now, but I'm going to get this up a little bit, and I'm going to listen to this. And right at the point where it's going to start to take off, I'm going to just back it down. I know you want to. You can do it. I'm going to do something else here. Pull that out temporarily. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. There it's going. So right about there. Okay. So I've got it right on the cusp of feedback. I'm going to give it a little bit of noise. You do have a noise generator in here. Sometimes I can help it to just latch onto the feedback. In my case, I don't think I need to, but just to show this off, I'm going to give it just a smidgen of pink noise, so there's some constant noise in the system here. And I'm going to hit start. And what's going to happen here, once I hit the start button, is it's going to start to creep this fader up from my position here. So I've got it at my starting position. It's going to creep that up slowly until feedback occurs. And it's going to immediately identify that frequency and apply a notch filter to cut it out. So watch this. Pay attention to the fader here. It's creeping it up. There we go. Got a couple there. Yep. It's very reactive. Yep. Got that one. So I've got a couple of filters here. I'm going to back it off now, and I'm going to exit. Get some audio happening here. So there you go. That was the feedback wizard. You can see it is incredibly reactive, and it will, it'll apply the filter before the ring, gets too annoying or gets to that ear-piercing level. So it's it's an awesome tool. And once you feel like you've got enough filters, or once you've got, this to an adequate level, where you're not feeding back, then you can exit the wizard here, or you can let it keep going until it automatically finds a spot where it's not needing to apply filters anymore. Typically, it'll use maybe 4 to 6 filters to adequately stabilize a PA. If it starts to take up much more than that, you might have a gain structure issue to begin with. So you might need to kind of reevaluate your gain structure. So we're looking to use about 4 to 6 filters for initial PA stabilization in our ringing out the room process. And then after that, we should have some filters left over that are available to us still. Okay, so I've rung out my room now, and now my event is going. The acoustics in the venue have changed a little bit. There's a bunch of people in there now. The band is on stage and they're getting into it. So it is possible, even after running the initial stabilization process, for feedback to kind of creep up every now and then, depending on what's going on. In that instance, that's when you come in here and use your manual kill. The manual kill button is super, super cool because the tool is not always working. So in the wizard mode, in the automatic mode, it's taking control of your main output fader and automatically applying those filters. You don't want it to be doing that during a show, right, or during an event. But you still want to have the ability to control the feedback if you need to. You still want the ability to access this tool, and you can with the manual mode. So just to demonstrate this real quick, from this point, now that I've stabilized my PA, I'm going to put my microphone back up over here, and I'm going to manually creep this up, and then I'm just going to hit that button right there. So what it's going to do when feedback occurs, the little box in here that says no lock, it is going to lock onto a frequency. It's going to identify the frequency that is feeding back, and then all I have to do is hit that red button to apply the filter and notch it out. So we're going to check it out. All right, so it's starting to go. So it's locked on there. No locked on there. Got it. Okay, it's hearing something. It's locking on right about. Okay. Bam. So obviously with me holding this in front of the speaker there, that's not an ideal situation. It's just going to keep going no matter how many filters I apply. But in a realistic scenario, this tool is very, 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 whoops. I've got to close my loop. Aha, there we go. Yeah, this tool is very, very advantageous to very quickly and easily, control your feedback throughout the event. You don't have to worry about feedback as an issue anymore with this tool at your disposal. So that is the anti-feedback system. And the last thing I'm going to touch on here is another process, or another what is the term I use? It's another tool that is used to simplify a complex process. And this is going to be the room tuning wizard. And I'm going to show you this. I'm going to end with this, but ideally, you'd probably actually want to run this process much earlier in your workflow, probably first. And what it does, I'm going to get to it here. I'm going to press the wizards button, which is located in the button cluster above the wheel. I can show that to you. I'll back out slightly. There we go. So I've got a wizards button here, and you press that, and you get to your wizards screen. And now I can select my tuning wizard here. There we go. So there it goes. So it essentially is going to tune the output of your PA or whatever output you're working with to the acoustic space. It'll sort of flatten the frequency response of that output, or of the output of the PA. And it just gives you a really, really nice, clean starting point to mix from, kind of by stabilizing, by flattening the EQ curve of your PA to your acoustic space. It's just another one of those things that can just kind of elevate the entire PA and can elevate the entire sound by running this process kind of early on and getting that nice tuning on the system itself. And again, so this is traditionally a very complex process. If anyone's ever heard of something called a SMART tool, it's SMAART, those are used to do this, and they are very expensive and they're very complicated and they involve a lot of math. But to kind of simplify the process, and what you do is you set up these tools, and you have some microphones set up in the room, in the event, and you play pink noise out of the system at a very loud volume, and your microphones are listening to the PA playing this pink noise, and it is running it through a couple of different processes. And what it's doing, it is listening to the sound that is happening acoustically in the room, and it is comparing that to the digital version of the signal that the PA is playing. So it's listening to the two, and then it's comparing them, saying, okay, this is what I know that it's supposed to, this is the digital sample, is supposed to sound like this. This is what it sounds like actually in the room, and so here are the differences, and then it will create an EQ curve to compensate for that and flatten the response and flatten those differences out. So this does that for you. It's incredibly powerful. And it's really easy to use. So it does require I wouldn't say it requires, I would say we highly recommend that you use a tuning microphone for this, or a measurement microphone for this. It's a very specific type of microphone. If you do this with like an SM57 or something like that, your results, it'll work, but it probably won't work as well as if you had this specific microphone. And if you're unfamiliar with that, those microphones, if you've ever seen one that kind of comes down to like a needle point, so it comes down to a really, really thin little fine point at the end. That's a measurement microphone. There are all kinds of different varieties of them at many different price points. You don't need a crazy expensive one. You can pick up one for around $100 and it'll work just fine. But get your measurement microphone there, and then what you're going to do is you're going to connect it to the talkback channel on the mixer. So we do have a dedicated talkback channel and function on TouchMix here. So that's what it's going to listen to that microphone through. So you connect your measurement microphone in there, and then on the screen here, you navigate to your wizard. And on the screen, we have our selection buttons, so we can choose which output we want to tune. And in this case, we probably want to start with our main PA outputs. And then if we wanted to run the tuning on any of our auxes, we have the ability to do that as well. So you make your selection there, and then we can choose the precision method, so how precise we want these calculations to be. And I'll talk about what those are in a second. Once I've made that selection here, I'm just going to hit next, and take me to this screen. And now I have this diagram here, which shows me roughly where to place my microphone in the room relative to my PA. If I need to apply phantom power to that mic, I can do that right from the screen. And then I hit begin, and then you will see our RTA kind of come to life. I'm not going to do it here because what it does from this point, once you hit begin, is it does start to play that pink noise out of the loudspeakers that you're tuning at a relatively high volume. And you'll see kind of the RTA kind of come to life here, and it'll be listening for that and making its calculations. It takes about 20 to 25 seconds to make its calculation, and then it'll shut the pink noise off, and it'll take you to the last screen in the wizard here, which will show you the curve that it came up with. After it made its calculation, it says, this is what I heard. This is the EQ that I recommend that you apply to your output, and you have the option to apply it or run the wizard again, or just disregard it if you just wanted to run it just to see the curve for yourself, and then maybe you want to just recreate that on your own in your graphic EQ, however you want to do it, whatever you want to do with it after it's made its calculation. But its calculation is a very powerful process. Now, so to back up a little bit about these different precision options here. So what these are going to do are essentially it's going to take multiple samples as you step up through these options here. So at the low precision here, when we advance to our next screen here, it's going to tell you to place the mic right there, and then it's going to take that one measurement, and then it's going to give you an EQ curve based on that measurement. If I select medium or even high, you're going to get 2 measurements on the medium and 3 measurements on high. So then once you advance here, you're going to get this screen. It's going to take its measurement here, and then it's going to present to you with a different diagram. It's going to take that calculation and store it, and then it's going to give you a different diagram and say, okay, now move the microphone somewhere else. Move it over here. Then it's going to listen to that and make a second calculation. And then if you're using the full highest value here, it's going to store that calculation and then present you with a third graph and say, okay, now move the microphone here. Then it's going to make another calculation, and then it's going to compare all of those calculations and present you with the most accurate tuning curve to tune your PA with right there. So that is the tuning wizard. It is a highly powerful tool. And again, this and the anti-feedback tool are available on all 3 mixers. Everything I've shown you today is available on all 3 mixers. So just to kind of wrap it up here, at this point, with everything I showed you, hopefully you're comfortable navigating around the mixer. You can start building your mix, and with these additional features, like the presets, the simple mode, the anti-feedback, and the room tuning wizards, you can get a great sounding mix up and running very, very quickly, and you really don't have to know a whole lot about audio engineering. The mixer does it for you. The TouchMix is like having a virtual sound engineer with you at all times. With the tools that are built into it, if you know how to use them and how to get to them, this thing can do it for you virtually, and which can be advantageous in a time-saving situation. It can be advantageous in a learning situation. You can use these tools to kind of learn audio, sort of in an inverse method. But it really is delivering results. The goal with the TouchMix series was to deliver results to any level of user. So you can get up and running, you can get a good sound, and you can be comfortable and you can be confident that it's going to work and perform. So there you go. That is the introduction to TouchMix here. Are there any questions at all? I guess I'm pretty quiet this session. Any comments? Anything you liked? Anything you didn't get? Anything I went through too fast? Maybe. Don't be shy.
Okay, they're coming. They're flying in. Does the room wizard set any delay?
Does the room wizard set any delay? It does not. That's a good question, actually. Might have to have John answer that one. My assumption would be that if you have delay on the output that you're running it on, that delay would be in line with the wizard. But I do not know that definitively. That is a great question. We'll get that verified here in a second.
Yeah, I would set that delay before you run the.
Yeah, you definitely want to be setting up
Yeah,
delays.
That's as easy as taking your measurements and then dialing it in.
Yeah,
On the output
and then
setting.
again, just to set your delay, you would just go here,
Right.
configure delay, make sure it's punched in, and then get to your wizard there, and then run that.
The next question, we had a question about user buttons. What are 1, 2, 3, and 4 used for? Do you want to do a quick
Sure.
run through?
Well, user buttons, that's a fantastic question. They are used for almost anything you want them to be used for. By default, they do have default assignments, and they are a little bit different on the 30 versus the 8 and 16, but I'll show you. If I go into my menu and I select user buttons here, I can see my user buttons screen here. By default, let me actually reset all of these because I have used a couple of them. On the 30, the first 4 default to navigation left, so U1 is going to be nav left. So just to show you what that does, if I'm on my main mix screen and I select a fader and I start pressing U1, it's going to just scrub through my faders to the left. And then U4 is the other way, so that's going to scroll to the right. So that's navigation. And any screen I'm on, if I select a parameter, I can start scrolling through the different parameters with these buttons. If I go into my EQ, it will, whoops, I need to get out of simple mode. It will scroll through my parameters that way. If I go to my compressor, so they're just incremental navigation buttons. On the 30 here, 2 and 3 are going to be clip clear and cue clear. So if you're in the menu here, this section here, the clear section, you have a clip clear and a cue clear, which essentially clip clear will clear out any of your clip indications. So up in the navigation strip here, you have your mini fader representations. If you clip a channel, the corresponding channel in the mini faders is going to turn red, and that's your clip indication. That's how you know you clipped that channel. If you want to get rid of those red marks, you're going to come in here and engage that. By default, user button 2 is already set up for that. So you don't have to come into the menu to clear your clips. You just hit U2 and clear your clips. And then U3 is clear cue, which is the same thing for your cue features. So anything that you have queued at any given time, you can hit U3 and clear any of those cues out like that. On the 8 and 16, however, U2 and U3 are assigned as copy and paste. So there's a really, really cool copy and paste feature that we're actually going to go over in another webinar that's down the line a little bit. But there's a copy and paste feature, and by default on the 8 and 16, that feature is set at U1 and U3. So U2 is copy, U3 is paste. On the TouchMix 30 here, let me show you my buttons. Yeah, so on the TouchMix 30 here, I actually have an additional 4 buttons. So the TouchMix 30 has 8 user buttons. U7 and U8 here are the default copy and paste for your TouchMix 30. So, and then just kind of to continue the conversation a little bit, you can change what these do at any time. You can come into the user button menu here, within the menu screen, select user buttons, and I can use my navigation tabs to select which user button specifically I want to set up. And then I have my menu options here. I can set this thing up to do a whole bunch of different things. I can have it in, I can be recalling input or custom presets that I might have saved on any of my channels. I can recall output processing if I'd saved any of those. I can use it to recall different scenes. I can activate mutes on channels or outputs or groups even. If I want to set up, if I have a DCA or a subgroup set up and I want to be able to mute it with a user button, I can use it to navigate to different screens. If there's a very particular screen that I want to be able to have access to with the touch of a button, maybe like the, if you're using the TouchMix feature in a talking or speech environment and you want to be able to get to the auto mixer on a single button, you can assign it like that. You can use it to control the recording transport. So you can set up physical buttons to activate my play and stop or my record button, or I can use it to arm all of my channels or set them all to track, things like that. I can use it to select specific faders. I can use it to, these ones are really cool. I can use it, I like this miscellaneous option. So there's my copy and paste and miscellaneous, and then I have my select parameter options here where I get my navigation, my default settings for U1 and U4, that's nav left and nav right. We also have these options here, the fader to 0 and fader off are really, really cool. So fader to 0, if I were to set this user button up on U1, I'm going to change this assignment, would be the inverse. It's the inverse of our 0 button here. So to show you, if I press the 0 button on an input channel, it's going to pull that channel all the way out. That's what the 0 button does. Now, if I've set up my U1 as fader to 0, and so that is automatically going to take my fader to unity. Okay, so watch. Boom. So now I have the ability to go the other way. I can clear it out, or I can set it to unity, and I can do this. This is really, really helpful if you want to set up like a mirror, an aux mirror of your main, or if you're utilizing an aux in a post fader pickoff point, and you typically want to be setting all of your channel faders for that aux mix to unity. And instead of kind of just having to dial them all up like this, with a U1 set at fader to unity, I can just select them and hit them all up to unity very, very quickly. That's an option I find particularly useful. And then there's an inverse of that, which is fader off. So on an input, the functionality of the user button is essentially that. It's fader to off. On an output, however, I'm not going to do it on the main output. On an output, it takes an output fader to unity. Okay, so the 0 button sort of works in opposition based on outputs and inputs. So 0 button on an output takes it to unity. 0 button on an input takes it all the way out. If you want the inverse function for an output fader, so if you want to be able to take an output fader all the way down, I could use the fader off function. So I'll go to U2 and I will set that up as fader off. And now if I select an output fader and hit U2, it takes it all the way out. So user buttons are a great sort of additional customizable navigation and operation tool that you can really set up to do just about anything you want. I also have tap tempo here. This one is really cool. So if you're using a delay, I'll go to my effects here, and where's my delay? There we go. So I got my mono delay here. There is a tap tempo control on your delay itself, and if you activate that, it throws it to your wheel. You can see my wheel started blinking there, and now I can tap the wheel to set my tap tempo. Okay, I've set that, but I have to be in this screen to set that. So if I'm using my delay a little bit more dynamically, and if I want to be kind of resetting this tempo throughout different songs, or maybe even within a particular song, I can assign tap tempo to a user button instead. We'll select U3 here for that one. Tap tempo, mono delay, effects 1. Oh, I was on U2, that's okay. So now U2 is set to my tap tempo for my mono delay on effects 1. And so you can see it blinks. It's always going to blink like that. And anytime I want to change the tap tempo on that delay, I just tap my user button there and it changes the tempo for me. Now I got a different song. I need to slow it down a bit. There you go. So fantastic functionality on a user button there like that.
And one more thing, Jason, if
yeah.
you could run through saving a scene.
Absolutely. Saving a scene works like this. So you navigate to your scenes first. There's 2 ways, if you're looking at your mix screen like this, 2 ways to get to your scenes. One, probably the easiest, is just to select this button up here that says scenes. That will take you directly into your scenes screen. The other way to get there is from the menu. So if I'm out at home, I hit menu. Now I'm looking at my menu screen, and scenes is the option that's right here in the upper left-hand corner. I select that, and now I'm at this screen. So if I want to save myself a custom scene, I'm going to hit this button here, save as, and I'll punch in a little closer now. So that's the save as button here. And that's going to give me this, this window here. I'm going to give it a name. If it's a custom scene, you probably want to be naming it something that is custom. I can just say this is Jason's, whoops, I can spell. This is an audio lesson, not a typing lesson. Jason's scene. Cool, so I've named it. You have the ability to save it either internally to the mixer, or if you have a USB storage device connected, you can choose to save it there instead. At any point, you can move scenes between the mixer and USB storage as well. I'm going to choose to save it in the mixer for now, and I just hit save, and then I'm going to confirm. It says, you sure you want to do this? I say yes, and there you go. Now it popped up in my as an available scene in my mixer menu there. So this is my mixer and my USB scene. So if I had a USB stick plugged in that I had saved scenes on, those would appear there. And now I can access my scene from these menus there. Simple as that. Good questions. Good questions. The user button one was really good too. Thanks for that.
Yeah, and Jason, what's the latest on the recordings? My understanding the last time we talked was that it's going on our blog.
So the recordings right now, we're only offering to those who have attended each webinar. So after you attend any one of these webinars, you will receive a follow-up email either the same day or the next day, and it'll have a link to be able to view the recording of that webinar. And that's what we're kind of the way we're running that for the time being. That may change down the line. We may open those up to the general public at some point, but right now we're keeping it a little focused to those who have attended. And so, yeah, that's where we're at. That's what we're doing with recordings at this time.
Yep. That was
Cool.
awesome.
Yeah.
We went through all the questions.
Fantastic. Well, that was good. Hopefully that was insightful for you guys. Hopefully I was able to teach you something and give you some good information on the TouchMix here. That's all I got. I guess we'll go ahead and close out. We're a few minutes beyond the hour here, so I appreciate you all hanging out with us. I hope you're all doing well. I hope you're all healthy and safe. And again, happy Friday. Thanks for being with us. And do come back for our many more webinars that we're going to be conducting over the next few weeks. We're having a lot of fun. We're hoping you're having fun hanging out with us. So check out the calendar and please come back. Thanks a lot.